a lot going on, of course, with the focus in Minnesota on the ICE raids and the murder of a 37-year-old woman the other morning. In Wisconsin, Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez yesterday put out a call for legislators to adopt protections and transparency standards for federal immigration enforcement operating within Wisconsin. The Lieutenant Governor joins us now. She's also a candidate for governor here in Wisconsin. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So obviously, timing-wise, your statement and your call for action meshes well with what's going on in Minnesota and Portland and Chicago. Was there an internal clock ticking in Wisconsin that made you put it out now? Have there been credible rumors or threats that ICE is on its way to Milwaukee or Madison or anywhere else?
Well, we've seen reports of increased ICE activity right on the border of Minnesota recently. And I think any state should be preparing for ICE to come in like they are in Minneapolis, even if they're a red state or a purple state. If they've got blue dots, cities that are blue, we should expect that the Trump administration may be doing the same thing into those cities. So we need to have leadership and we need to prepare.
So, in the press release that you put out yesterday, and if you've been following along the story in Minneapolis, we saw the ICE raids go to a local high school, Roosevelt High School, which has been making news. And you talk about sensitive locations in the press release that you put out yesterday. Why do you think, in your experience, these are such central places to these ICE raids? We've even seen them be outside hospitals, other schools. Why are these such a place that ICE wants to be at right now?
You know, I think they want to create an atmosphere of fear. And people should not be afraid to go to school. People should not be afraid to go get the health care that they need. People should not be afraid to go to the courthouse, to go to their churches. This is something that we have to make sure that we're putting out there, that these are sensitive areas, and we want to make sure that people feel safe going there.
There's been a lot of talk as we watch these raids about ICE trying to gain access to places without warrants. There's no reason you're pulling people out of cars for another. What's your answer to that, or what do you hope these proposed protections will do to remedy those situations?
So what I put out there is that they should have a judicial warrant for somebody that they're going to be arresting. They should know who they are arresting. What we have seen is that they have been arresting citizens who've repeatedly said that they're citizens. They have arrested members of enrolled tribes, who are clearly citizens.
Yes.
And they did not believe that their identification was valid. Clearly, they did not have a warrant, a judicial warrant for those individuals who they were arresting and detaining, sometimes for days. These are the kind of things we need to insist upon in Wisconsin. And we are not asking for anything else than what we expect our current law enforcement to do. We expect our current law enforcement to be clearly identified, to be unmasked, to wear body cameras, to make sure that if they have something happen on the job, that there is a clear accountability measures, that there's a way we can investigate it to make sure these types of things don't happen again. We are not seeing that with ICE agents in Minneapolis. We're not seeing that all across the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Wisconsin? What type of authority does the state actually have? I mean, we saw Minnesota and the Twin Cities file a lawsuit yesterday. Chicago, Illinois also filed lawsuits yesterday. So what type of authority does the state actually have to regulate these federal agents coming into our cities and to our communities?
So I do believe the state has an ability to regulate that, and we've seen other states put out legislation with these exact type of measures that I'm talking about. And if the federal government wants to say in court that they want to make sure that their officers are unidentified, masked, and unaccountable, let them make that argument in court. But I think we should have some leadership at the state level to make sure that we are keeping our folks safe here. And these things that I'm proposing keep everybody safe. It keeps law enforcement safe in Wisconsin when they're clearly identified, when they're unmasked, when they wear body cameras. Why wouldn't we want ICE officers to do the same?
It would make sense. Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez is our guest. She is also a candidate for governor in the upcoming primary and then the November election. Lieutenant Governor, when you hear people talk about these kind of things, and all of these protections make sense to me. They make perfect sense. The problem comes, what would you tell your constituents if they go, yeah, but if we do this, then funding for childcare is going to get withheld. Funding for the schools is going to get withheld. We're obliged to follow, I think, the protections that you're proposing, but then the consequences to everybody, what can we do? I guess this is a question I asked in the first hour. What can we do?
As citizens, you can reach out to your state representatives and your federal representatives to talk about what you want to see in terms of ICE behavior. I live in Waukesha. I live in a red community. I talk to conservatives all the time. And what I hear from them is this is not the type of behavior that they want to see within their state. So these are things that Wisconsinites want. These are things that Americans want. And we cannot live in fear and not try to put out some of these safety regulations and standards because we're afraid something else is going to happen down the line. They have tried to they stopped childcare funding in Minnesota and a couple other states, regardless of what they
Right.
had done. So they're going to do what they're going to do. And then we need to use the justice system to make sure that they are also following the law. And so what we've seen in some of these court cases is that there's an immediate injunction. They have to give the money back to the
Yeah.
states because there is immediate harm. So if we continue to not put out some of these regulations or expectations because we're afraid of what might happen later, we can't it's so much chaos up in Washington. We can't really predict what President Trump and his administration is going to do. So let's go ahead and protect our citizens.
So, do you think this is going to signal some sort of broader shift in how states and communities really push back against this administration? I mean, this has been a very targeted effort towards the blue states. And, in Wisconsin, I think it's a little bit different because we're dealing with more of a purple voting state. But do you think states will want to push back a little bit harder based on what the actions of this particular administration?
I do. I think we're going to see a lot of leadership from the states. We've seen that in Illinois and California, and all sorts of other states that have put legislation out there, or guidelines out there, and we're going to continue to see that as we move forward, because unless they change how they are operating, the civil rights abuses that we're seeing where they're detaining people without due process, they're not allowing them to talk to a lawyer or be able to have what is just fundamental to the United States, which is having your day in court, right, and being able to have due process. If they're going to continue to go down these lines, we're going to have to continue to fight back.
So if people are listening right now and they don't really know what to do, they're worried about the people in their community, their own families. What advice do we give them today? What can we tell them that they should be doing, they should be looking for right now?
I think what you want to make sure that you're doing is connecting with your local organizations, connecting with folks who are worried like you are, because there's strength in numbers. I would say we have to continually peacefully protest, and I am saying peacefully protest this administration. Because we want them to show that this is a problem for us in Wisconsin. We want them to show that this is overwhelmingly unpopular. We need to push back. Contact your state representatives, contact your federal representatives, regardless of which party that they're from, to make sure that they know what your priorities are. So those are the things that I would tell people to do.
We are talking to Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez, and of course, also a gubernatorial candidate for the state of Wisconsin. We're working on getting Brian back again here. If you wonder why he dropped off, and so the Lieutenant Governor and I will continue to have this conversation while we work on that. But my other question is, we kind of started this by saying, do you think that they're going to come to Wisconsin cities? And do we have plans in our bigger cities, Madison and Milwaukee, where we know they would definitely be a target? What are you hearing from local law enforcement, local officials for some of our bigger cities right now?
So some of our larger cities do have already some regulations in place to not allow law enforcement to go into sensitive areas such as schools, hospital systems, churches, but that is not uniform across the state of Wisconsin. And so making sure that all municipalities know that they can also put these regulations out, and they could do that one by one. It would be better if we could do it at a statewide level so that everyone's protected.
Absolutely. Now, if people, if there's ICE activity in communities, if you're
Mhm.
already starting to see, because you mentioned that on our border cities, we're already starting to see some ICE activity. What do you recommend people do? What should be the first thing that our listeners are doing in those cases?
I think letting your neighbors know that there's ice activity there, making sure that people are aware when they're in your neighborhood. They've been doing this through general social media channels, saying, they're over here. Making sure we are documenting, and I mean filming ICE officers while they're doing their enforcement, because we have to make sure they're doing this with the rule of law. And you have the right to film. You do. You have the right to film officers. You do. No matter what they say, you have the right to film officers. So those are the kinds of things I would recommend to make sure that we can hold folks accountable if they're violating the law.
And what do you think that accountability will look like with the ICE agents if they're violating someone's constitutional rights? What does that look like in Wisconsin?
So we if they're violating Wisconsin law, as governor, I would hold them accountable. I would hold them accountable. And I think that you're likely seeing that within Minneapolis right now. The local district attorney is looking to see what she can do in terms of making sure she holds them accountable and does the investigation. It is alarming to me that they are not allowing local police to participate in that investigation. Law enforcement is built on trust. And if we lose trust with the ICE agents, how are we supposed to trust that that investigation was fair and impartial? And this will affect other law enforcement agencies. This is going to affect our local police. This is going to affect our state patrol officers. This is going to affect everybody across the line, because once the community loses trust with law enforcement, they don't always see the difference between ICE and local law enforcement. And so we have to make sure that we have a process that is transparent and fair and follows the law.
That is Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez, of course, talking about how Wisconsin should be handling some of this ICE occupation and potential ICE raids if we should see any of the same activity coming out of Minneapolis. And of course, she is also a candidate for Wisconsin governor. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, for being here this morning. We really do
Thank you for
appreciate your
having me.
time.